There is a quiet place that the world cannot see. A place where chaos loses its grip, where fear has no voice, where storms break upon walls unseen. Some call it peace, some call it safety. But those who have tasted it know. It is the shelter of the Almighty. And tonight, I want to take you there. Think for a moment about the life we live. How fragile it can seem. One phone call can turn a good day into sorrow. One diagnosis can shake even the strongest heart. One unexpected loss can feel like the ground beneath our feet has disappeared. We live in a world where shadows stretch long, where news headlines whisper danger, where even the silence of the night can carry its own terror. And yet, listen, there is a promise. Not written in human ink, not carved by fragile hands, but spoken by the voice of God Himself. A promise that says, "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." What does it mean to live under a shadow that protects, rather than frightens? What does it mean to walk into tomorrow with no trembling in your spirit? What does it mean to know that, though 1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, the promise still stands, it will not come near you? This is no ordinary word. It is a key to peace in restless times, a key to courage when fear stalks your doorway, a key to security when everything else seems uncertain. Stay with me for a while, and let us unlock it together, for when we understand this promise, we will not merely survive the world, we will rise in it. We will not merely pass through the valley of shadows. We will walk through with our heads lifted high, because we are covered, shielded, and carried by a God who never slumbers. So lean in, do not listen casually, let every word fall into your spirit, like seed into fertile soil. Because what you are about to hear is not just poetry, not just scripture, not just motivation. It is a map that leads to confidence, courage, and unshakable security under the wings of the Almighty. There is something profoundly moving about the idea of shelter. A shelter is not just a structure, it is a promise. It says, here you are safe. Here you can rest. Here no harm can reach you. From the earliest days of humanity, we have sought shelter from the storms, from the heat of the sun, from the darkness of the night. A cave, a tent, a house. Each one whispers the same assurance: here, you are covered. But when the psalmist speaks of dwelling in the shelter of the Most High, he is not talking about walls made of stone or roofs built of wood. He is describing something infinitely greater. He is speaking of a covering that cannot be torn down by wind, cannot be burned away by fire, cannot be shaken by the trembling of the earth. It is the covering of God Himself. And notice the word He chooses: dwell. Not visit, not pass through, not stop by occasionally, but dwell. To dwell means to make your home, to set down your roots, to live continuously. How many of us, if we are honest, only visit the presence of God when life feels heavy? We pass through His shelter in moments of crisis, whispering quick prayers when the storms rage, only to step back into the open once the skies seem calm again. But the psalmist invites us to a different kind of relationship. Not a fleeting refuge, but a permanent habitation. Imagine for a moment a traveler who passes through the desert. The sun is merciless, the sand burns beneath his feet, the wind whips against his skin. He comes across an oasis with shade, water, and rest. Would it not be strange if he only sipped a little water, only stood a few minutes in the shade, and then hurried back into the scorching wilderness? That is how many of us treat the shelter of the Most High. We taste His peace but do not linger. We sip His presence but do not drink deeply. To dwell in His shelter is to stay, to decide that His presence is not a temporary relief but a permanent address. It is waking each day and knowing, I do not step into this world uncovered. I rise under the shadow of the Almighty. And the psalmist gives us this image of shadow. Shadows in the natural world can be frightening. They can conceal, they can darken, they can distort. But the shadow of the Almighty is different. It is not a place of fear, but of safety. To stand in God's shadow is to stand so close that His presence eclipses everything else. It means that what is threatening me cannot even reach me directly. it must pass through him first. Think about that for a moment. When a child walks beside their parent in the heat of the day, they find relief in the parent's shadow. They know they are near. They know they are covered. The psalmist is telling us, stay close enough to God that his shadow is your comfort, his nearness your security. But how do we dwell? How do we step into this shelter and remain? It is not through walls built with hands, but through trust built with hearts. To dwell is to trust that God is not just present in the sanctuary, not just present in the sacred moment, but present in every breath, every step, every decision. It is to practice the awareness that he surrounds you, even when the evidence of your eyes seems to argue otherwise. And here lies the beauty. When you make the Most High your dwelling, you begin to see the world differently. You realize that danger does not define you, that fear does not hold you, that the unknown tomorrow cannot rob you of peace today. Because you are not exposed to the world as it is. You are covered by the God who reigns over it. There will still be storms. The psalmist does not promise an escape from them. There will still be nights that feel heavy, days that feel uncertain, losses that bring us to our knees. But when you dwell in the shelter of the Most High, you face the storm differently. You walk into the night with a lamp burning inside you. You rise from your knees not in despair, but in assurance. For the shelter of God does not mean the absence of trouble. It means the presence of protection. Consider the bird that gathers her young beneath her wings. She cannot stop the storm from raging, but she can cover her little ones, so that the rain does not reach them. The wind does not scatter them. They are still in the storm, but they are kept. And so it is with God. His shelter does not pluck us from the world, but it covers us within it. It allows us to stand in places where others have fallen, to breathe peace in moments that should have stolen our breath, to walk upright when fear demanded we crumble. And if you linger long enough under his shadow, something changes within you. You begin to live with a confidence not your own. You begin to walk with a boldness that does not make sense to the world. You begin to face dangers that once would have undone you, and you find your spirit unshaken, because it is not your strength holding you. It is his covering. So the invitation is simple, yet profound. Do not merely visit. Do not make his presence a momentary refuge. Make it your dwelling place. Let his shelter be where you rise, where you rest, where you return again and again. For in the shelter of the Most High, there is peace beyond understanding. In the shadow of the Almighty, there is safety no enemy can penetrate. And when you choose to dwell there, truly dwell there, you will discover what it means to live unafraid, covered, and secure under God's eternal wings. Fear. It is one of the oldest companions of humankind. It crept into the garden long before cities were built and civilizations rose. It lingers in the corners of our homes, in the silence of the night, in the weight of unspoken worries. Fear disguises itself in many forms, sometimes as anxiety over the future, sometimes as trembling before what we cannot control, sometimes as that gnawing question, what if? And yet, in the words of the psalmist, a bold declaration rises like a shout in the darkness. You shall not fear the terror by night, nor the arrow that flies by day. These are not soft words. They are not suggestions whispered to soothe a restless heart. They are a command and a promise interwoven. They speak directly into the very core of our humanity. You shall not fear. Why night? Because night represents the unknown. In the stillness, when the world grows quiet, the mind begins to stir. Shadows take shapes, silence magnifies doubts, and unseen dangers seem to creep closer. The terror by night is not only the enemy outside the door, it is the battle within our thoughts. But the psalmist says, even there, you are not to fear. And why day? Because in daylight the battles are visible. Arrows fly where eyes can see. Troubles rise like waves we cannot outrun. The psalmist covers both realms, the hidden fears of night and the visible struggles of day. Together they represent the totality of human danger, both seen and unseen. And still, the voice of God echoes, you shall not fear. Now let us be honest. Fear is not something we simply switch off. If it were, the world would not tremble as it does. We cannot command our hearts like we do machines. Fear is real. It is primal. It grips without permission. So how can the psalmist speak with such confidence, such audacity, to say we shall not fear? The answer lies not in human willpower, but in divine presence. Fearlessness is not the absence of danger. It is the assurance of protection. Think of a child walking into a dark room. Alone, the child trembles. Every creak is a monster, every shadow a threat. But let that child place their hand in their father's, and suddenly the fear fades. The darkness has not changed. The shadows have not disappeared. The monsters were never real. But what changes everything is presence. The hand of someone stronger, someone trustworthy, someone who can see what the child cannot. That is what makes fear lose its power. And this is the heart of Psalm 91. The fearlessness spoken of here is not born of denial, nor of reckless courage. It is born of trust. It is knowing that we are not alone in the night, not exposed in the day. The Almighty walks beside us, covering us, shielding us, keeping us. And when His presence is near, fear has no ground to stand on. Consider those words again: the terror by night, the arrow by day. The psalmist is describing life's uncertainties, those sudden, sharp intrusions that pierce without warning, and those creeping, lingering anxieties that wear us down slowly. He is naming the enemies that often go unnamed, and by naming them, he takes away their power. For fear thrives in the shadows of vagueness. But once spoken aloud, once confronted with the promise of God, it loses its sting. 1,000 may fall at your side, the psalmist says, 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. What a staggering statement. Imagine the scene: chaos all around, calamity on every side, and yet you stand untouched, because you are shielded by a promise greater than statistics, greater than probability, greater than circumstance. This does not mean that life will never wound us. It does not mean that loss, hardship, or grief will never enter our story. But it does mean that fear will not have the final word. It means that no matter the storm outside, peace can reign within. It means that the arrows may fly, but they cannot destroy the one whose soul is anchored in the shelter of God. Fear is a thief. It steals joy before sorrow has even arrived. It paralyzes before danger has even touched us. It whispers lies of defeat when victory is still possible. And yet, when we abide under the wings of the Almighty, we are free from the tyranny of fear. We learn to walk through both night and day with steady steps, not because we are blind to reality, but because we see a greater reality, that God is with us, and God is for us. There is a story told of a soldier on the battlefield, arrows flying all around, chaos breaking loose. When asked how he remained so calm, he said, "I know where I stand. If I live for Him. If I fall into His hands. Either way I am safe." That is the spirit of Psalm 91. It is not arrogance. It is not ignorance. It is trust. Trust so deep that fear has no room to settle. And this trust transforms the way we live. When fear no longer dictates our choices, courage rises. When the terror of night no longer chains us, we sleep in peace. When the arrows of day no longer dominate us, we walk with purpose. We discover that life is not meant to be survived in trembling, but to be lived in confidence. The psalmist is inviting us into that life, into that posture of fearless faith, into that assurance that no terror, no arrow, no darkness, no storm can undo the one who rests in the shelter of the Almighty. And as we embrace this truth, we become living testimonies that fear may roar, but it cannot rule. Danger may loom, but it cannot define. For we have been promised not just survival, but security under the wings of the God who never leaves, never fails, never forsakes. So we lift our eyes. We straighten our shoulders. We walk into the night with peace and into the day with courage. Because though the terrors and arrows may come, we are not afraid. We are held. We are shielded. We are fearless, not because of who we are, but because of whose shadow covers us. There is a certain tenderness in the way this psalm speaks of protection. It is not the cold image of walls rising high, nor the distant strength of a fortress built with stone alone. No, it is something more intimate, more personal. It speaks of wings of feathers, of angels charged with keeping watch. It paints a picture of a God who is not far off, observing from a throne in the clouds, but near, bending low, wrapping his people in care. We are told, he will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. Pause and let that image sink into the heart. The God who formed galaxies, who set the stars in their courses, who speaks and mountains rise, is also the God who gathers his children like a mother bird draws her little ones close. What greater protection could we ever need than this, that the Almighty shelters us with his very presence? But the psalmist does not stop at poetry. He gives us a promise, firm and unwavering. He will command his angels concerning you, to guard you in all your ways. This is not a vague comfort. It is a declaration. You are not walking through this life unguarded. You are not stumbling along without watchful eyes. Heaven itself has been assigned to your care. Angels, mighty, radiant beings, are given the task of keeping you. Their charge is not casual. It is specific. It is constant, to guard you in all your ways. Think of the weight of those words, all your ways. Not only in the moments when you are bowed in prayer, not only in the times when you stand in sacred spaces, but in the daily walk, in the ordinary steps, in the unseen routines. God's protection does not clock in and out like a hired guard. It does not watch you only in moments of visible danger. It surrounds you always, even when you do not see it, even when you do not feel it, even when you forget it. And perhaps that is one of the mysteries of divine protection. It is often invisible. We do not know how many arrows never reached us, because his shield intercepted them. We do not know how many accidents were diverted, how many dangers passed us by, how many traps were dismantled before our feet ever drew near. One day, when the story of our lives is told in full, we may see just how many times God's hand of protection spared us from harm we never even knew threatened us. But here is something vital. Protection does not mean insulation from every challenge. The psalm does not promise that storms will never come, that we will never walk through difficulty, that pain will never touch our lives. What it promises is that none of these things can destroy us when we are under his covering. Protection is not the absence of trial. It is the assurance of victory within it. It is the certainty that, though we may be pressed, we will not be crushed. Though we may be struck down, we will not be destroyed. Though we may walk through fire, we will not be consumed, for he is with us. Think of Daniel in the lion's den. The lions were real. Their hunger was real. The danger was real. But so was the protection of God, and not a hair on his head was touched. Think of the 3 Hebrew boys in the fiery furnace. The flames were real. The heat was deadly. The risk was undeniable. And yet, the promise held true. They walked out without even the smell of smoke on their garments. This is what divine protection looks like. Not always the removal of the threat, but the presence of God in the midst of it. And notice how this protection is rooted in relationship. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. Love unlocks the promise. To set our affection on God is to invite his protection into our lives. To trust his name is to rest under his covering. He does not protect out of obligation. He protects out of covenant love. And when that love wraps around us, fear begins to dissolve. Because protection brings peace. Imagine walking into the unknown with the unshakable knowledge that you are not alone, that forces greater than anything you face are already surrounding you, that the God of heaven has already gone ahead of you. Suddenly the unknown loses its terror, the threat loses its power, and the future no longer feels like a shadow, but a path already lit by his hand. We live in a world where security is often measured by locks, by alarms, by insurance policies, by plans we carefully design to shield ourselves from harm. And while wisdom in preparation is good, we must remember, no human shield is unbreakable, no earthly plan is foolproof. But there is a covering greater than them all, and it is found not in things, but in God. His protection cannot be hacked, cannot be bypassed, cannot be shaken. It is eternal. It is absolute. And this protection does more than keep us safe. It empowers us to live boldly. When we know we are guarded, we step forward without hesitation. When we know angels walk beside us, we speak truth without fear. When we know the Almighty covers us, we pursue our calling with courage. Protection does not simply preserve, it propels. It gives us the confidence to live fully, to dream bravely, to walk with purpose. So hear this promise and hold it close. You are not abandoned. You are not exposed. You are not walking unguarded. Heaven watches over you. The Almighty shelters you. Angels lift you up so that your foot does not stumble. And though danger may loom, though enemies may scheme, though uncertainty may surround, the word remains true. You are protected under His wings. This is not fragile safety. This is not fleeting security. This is divine protection. And when you embrace it, when you walk in it, when you live with the awareness of it, you will find a courage rising within you that no danger can silence. You will discover that the safest place in all the world is not behind stone walls, not under armored gates, not even surrounded by human strength, but in the shelter of the Almighty, where His promise to protect is eternal, unshakable, and sure. Trust, a simple word, yet it carries the weight of worlds. To trust is to lean, to surrender, to rest the full weight of our being on something, or someone, beyond ourselves. And in a world that teaches us to rely on our own strength, our own resources, our own cleverness, trust in God feels at once both radical and liberating. It asks us to loosen our grip on control, to unclench our fists from fear, and to believe that the one who formed us, who knows us, who loves us, is also the one who sustains and protects us. The psalm declares, "Because you have made the Lord your dwelling place, no harm will overtake you. No disaster will come near your tent." Notice the connection. Dwelling in His presence and trusting Him are inseparable. To dwell is not only to remain, it is to trust that the place where you remain is safe. No one builds their home on shifting sand knowingly. No one settles in a place where the ground cracks beneath their feet. To dwell in God is to say, "Here I rest. Here I believe I am secure. Here I know I am kept." But trust is tested most in uncertainty. It is easy to trust when skies are blue, when the road is smooth, when prayers are answered swiftly. It is another thing entirely to trust when darkness clouds the way, when answers seem delayed, when every outward sign says, "You are on your own." That is where victory is forged, not in the absence of testing, but in the midst of it. For trust that has never been tested is little more than sentiment. But trust that has been tried in the fire, trust that has walked through shadows and still clung to God, that is the kind of trust that leads to victory. Think of Abraham, called to leave his homeland without a map, without a guarantee of what lay ahead, only the promise, "Go to the land I will show you." Trust required steps into the unknown, but it was in those steps that destiny unfolded. Think of David, standing before Goliath with nothing but a sling and a stone. Logic said retreat. Fear said hide. But trust said, "The battle is the Lord's." And because he trusted, victory was written into his story. Trust is not blind, it sees differently. It does not deny the size of the giant, but it acknowledges the size of God. It does not pretend the storm is gentle, but it believes the one who commands the winds and waves. Trust shifts the focus from the danger around us to the power above us. And in that shift, we find strength, we find peace, we find victory. When we trust God, we exchange our fragile strength for His unshakable power. We lay down the heavy burden of trying to control everything, and instead lean on the everlasting arms. And something miraculous happens in that exchange. Fear loses its grip, anxiety loosens its hold, despair dissolves, and courage rises. Because victory does not come by clinging tighter to our own abilities, but by opening our hands and saying, "Lord, I trust you." And victory through trust is not always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like the quiet endurance, to keep going when quitting feels easier. Sometimes it looks like peace that makes no sense when chaos surrounds you. Sometimes it looks like hope that refuses to die, even when circumstances scream otherwise. Every time we choose to trust rather than to fear, to lean on God rather than on our own understanding, we experience victory, even if the world does not see it as such. The psalm reminds us that trust brings tangible promises. He will call on me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation.
What a cascade of assurance!
Not just protection, but presence. Not just deliverance, but honor. Not just survival, but satisfaction. This is the victory of trust. It opens the door to blessings beyond measure, to answers beyond expectation, to life beyond what we could achieve alone. But here this trust is not passive. It is not folding our arms and waiting idly for heaven to move. Trust is active. It is alive. It is choosing to pray when worry calls louder. It is choosing to act in faith when doubt demands retreat. It is stepping forward even when you cannot see the full path, because you know who holds the map. Trust walks. Trust believes. Trust obeys. And through such trust, victories are won. Picture a child learning to walk, reaching for a parent's hand. The child wobbles, stumbles, nearly falls. But the hand of the parent steadies them. Soon steps become surer, confidence grows, and before long the child walks freely. Trust in God works the same way. At first it may feel shaky, uncertain, as though you are walking on water like Peter, wondering if you will sink. But the hand of Christ steadies you, and the more you lean, the stronger your steps become. That is victory. Not because the waves disappear, but because your eyes are fixed on the one above them. And when we live this way, when we choose trust as the posture of our hearts, we find ourselves rising above fear, above doubt, above despair. We find a resilience not born of human will but of divine presence. We discover that life does not defeat us so easily, because we know our story is not held in the hands of chance but in the hands of God. Victory through trust is not only for ourselves, it becomes a testimony for others. When people see you stand in peace, when the world shakes, when they hear your voice steady in the face of uncertainty, when they watch you walk through valleys with your head held high, they begin to ask how. And in that moment, your life becomes a living declaration. This is the victory of trusting God. So trust, even when the night is long. Trust, even when the arrows fly. Trust, even when the outcome is unclear. Because trust is not about knowing every detail. It is about knowing the one who does. And in his hands your victory is secure. For the God who covers you, the God who commands angels concerning you, the God who has promised to answer when you call. He will not fail. Victory is not found in control. It is not found in certainty. It is not found in the absence of storms. Victory is found in trust. In leaning wholly on the God who never breaks his word, who never abandons his own, who never lets his promises fall to the ground. And when you live in that trust, you live in victory. Always, confidence. Courage. These are words the world often defines by strength of personality, boldness of speech, or fearlessness in action. But the confidence and courage born out of God's protection are different. They do not come from loud voices or daring gestures. They come from quiet assurance. They come from the unshakable knowledge that the one who made the heavens walks beside you, covers you, and carries you. This confidence is not pride, and this courage is not recklessness. They are gifts that flow naturally from dwelling under the shadow of the Almighty. When you know that God is your refuge, you begin to carry yourself differently. Your shoulders straighten, not in arrogance, but in peace. Your steps grow steady, not because the path is easy, but because you are not walking it alone. You look at tomorrow, not with trembling, but with expectation. For if God is with you, who can stand against you? The same Spirit who shielded the psalmist, who shut the lions' mouths, who walked in the furnace, still moves today. And if his wings are spread over you, what reason have you to cower? Confidence in God is not built on what you see but on what you know. The world says, "Show me and I will believe." Faith says, "Believe, and you will see." And from faith grows confidence. Confidence that even if the mountains quake, even if the seas roar, you will not be moved. Confidence that the hands stretched out over your life, are stronger than the storm surrounding you. Confidence that your story cannot end in defeat, because the author of your story is victory himself. And from confidence rises courage. Courage to stand when others bow. Courage to speak when silence feels safer. Courage to dream when circumstances say it is impossible. Courage to keep moving when the weight of life says, give up. This courage is not loud, though it may roar when needed. Often it is quiet, steady, unwavering. It is the courage of the one who knows I am not alone. I am covered. I am safe under his wings. This kind of courage does not deny fear. It confronts it. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to let fear dictate your choices. It is hearing the voice of fear and saying, I hear you, but I will not bow to you, because I trust the one who is greater. And every time you choose courage in God, you push back against the darkness. You silence the lies. You break chains that would have held you captive. The psalmist reminds us, 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. That is confidence. That is courage. Not because you are stronger, but because God's covering is stronger than every force against you. Picture a soldier on the battlefield, arrows raining down, chaos erupting all around, yet he stands. Not because the arrows are imaginary, not because the battle is easy, but because he is shielded by armor that cannot be pierced. That is how it feels to walk in God's protection. The world may crumble, but you stand. And this confidence and courage overflow into every part of life. When you rise each morning, you rise not with dread, but with hope. When you face decisions, you do so not with crippling doubt, but with peace. When challenges come, you meet them not with despair, but with steady faith. You discover that courage is not just for great battles. It is for everyday living. It is in the way you love others when it is hard, the way you forgive when bitterness tempts you, the way you keep sowing kindness when the world feels cold. Living in courage means refusing to let fear shrink your life. Confidence in God also shapes how you see yourself. Many people live beneath the weight of insecurity, measuring themselves against standards they will never meet, haunted by voices that tell them they are not enough. But when you know you are sheltered by the Almighty, your identity is no longer fragile. You no longer have to prove your worth, for His protection proves your value. You are worth the covering of heaven. You are worth the charge of angels. You are worth the sacrifice of Christ Himself. And when you believe that insecurity loses its grip, you live with confidence, not in yourself, but in who God says you are. And this confidence gives birth to bold purpose. You no longer waste your life chasing safety, for you already have it in God. Instead, you pursue the calling He placed within you. You take risks for love, for truth, for justice, because you know you are covered. You step into spaces others avoid, because you know your steps are ordered. You shine light in dark places, not fearing the darkness, because you know the light within you cannot be extinguished. That is what it means to live in courage. It is not only for survival, it is for impact. And the beauty of this life is that it speaks louder than words. People notice when you live unafraid. They notice when you walk in peace while others panic. They notice when you carry yourself with quiet strength in the face of uncertainty. And they wonder, what is their secret? And in that wondering, your life becomes a testimony. You become living proof of the truth of Psalm 91. That those who dwell in the shelter of the Most High walk in confidence and courage that the world cannot explain and cannot take away. So let us rise, not timid, not bowed down by fear, but steady, assured, courageous. Let us face each day with the calm certainty that God's wings cover us, His angels guard us, His love surrounds us. Let us live lives that declare, I am safe, I am kept, I am not afraid, for the one who watches over Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. And as long as His shadow rests upon us, we can live with heads lifted high, with voices unshaken, with hearts bold, with courage that outlasts the storm. This is the fruit of dwelling in His shelter. This is the promise of Psalm 91 made flesh in our lives. That in a world riddled with fear, we can be people of confidence. That in a time marked by uncertainty, we can walk with courage. That in every season, every battle, every shadow, we can live unafraid. Because we are under the wings of the Almighty, and His protection is sure. We have walked through the psalm together, word by word, promise by promise. We have heard of the shelter of the Most High, of the shadow that protects rather than frightens, of the fearlessness we are called to in the night and in the day, of the promise of angels guarding our ways, of the victory found in trusting God, and of the confidence and courage that rise when we know we are covered. And now, the choice is ours. Do we only admire these words, or do we live them? Do we leave them as poetry on a page, or do we take them as power for our lives? Psalm 91 is not simply a song of the past, it is a promise for the present. It was written not just to be recited, but to be embodied. Life will still bring shadows. Life will still send arrows. There will be nights when fear whispers and days when danger looms. But we have been given a greater truth: we are not alone. We are not unprotected. We are not abandoned. We are held in the hands of the Almighty, and under His wings no evil can undo us. So lift your head, stand tall, step boldly into tomorrow. Live with the assurance that heaven watches over you, that God Himself surrounds you, that the same power that raised Christ from the grave covers you even now. Let your life declare to the world, I am not afraid. I am sheltered. I am strong, not by my own might, but by the shadow of the Almighty. And let this be the message that echoes long after the final word is spoken. True security is not found in walls, or wealth, or human strength. True security is found in God alone. And when you dwell in His shelter, when you rest in His shadow, when you trust His word, you will live not as a prisoner of fear, but as a child of courage, a bearer of light, and a witness to the world that the promises of God are unshakable. So go forth in confidence, walk in courage, rest in peace, for you are covered, you are kept, you are loved, and under His wings you are forever secure.